Conservative Principles, an overview. If you're wondering what it means to be a conservative, this chapter is a good place to start. It gives a general overview of modern American conservative thought, as well as a brief description of its opposite, liberalism. When you're ready for a little more detail, flip through the chapters in the rest of this book. There you'll find issue-by-issue answers to questions about conservative ideas and values. What is a conservative? The term conservative comes from the Latin word conservare, which means to keep safe, maintain, or preserve. Conservatives want to preserve society's best values and wisdom. The values that conservatives strive to maintain aren't new. Most have been around for a very long time, passed down from generation to generation because they make life worth living. Values like love your neighbor as yourself and honesty is the best policy. Virtues such as self-discipline, generosity, and gratitude. When we forget or neglect these things, individual lives unravel and civilizations can even come apart. When conservatives step back and look at the world, when they study human activity and history, they see a pattern. That pattern is a set of truths that run through all of time, principles about how best to live and treat our fellow human beings. These principles aren't truths that each person invents for himself or herself. They are universal standards of right and wrong, or laws of nature and of nature's God, as the founders of the United States put it in the Declaration of Independence. They were in operation before you were born, and will be around long after you die. The Ten Commandments, found in the biblical books of Exodus and Deuteronomy, are some of the greatest and most famous examples of such timeless moral laws. No better code of conduct has ever been written. When people follow principles like "thou shalt not steal" and "thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor," their lives tend to be fulfilling, meaningful, and good. When they break them, bad things generally happen. Conservatives recognize that enduring moral truths exist, and they are concerned with preserving ways to help us all live up to them. But conservatives don't claim to be morally superior to everyone else. Like everyone else, they are imperfect creatures. They also realize that the world is a complicated place, that applying principles to life requires judgment, and that sometimes there are exceptions to rules. For example, killing is generally wrong, but sometimes, for example in war, killing is necessary. Conservatives take history seriously. They know there is much to be learned from the long record of human experience. It reveals both the possibilities and limitations of human nature. History contains much inhumanity and misery, yet an honest reading shows that despite some great blots, the achievement of Western civilization, and the United States in particular, stands high. None of this means that conservatives revere and want to preserve everything old. Sometimes old ideas, such as ancient prejudices, need to be rejected. Values are worth protecting only if they do good. Preserving society's best values and wisdom lies at the heart of conservatism. But there's more to it than that, as you'll see throughout this book. In America, being conservative involves a commitment to the principles upon which this country was founded, ideals found in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, and other writings, ideals such as that all people are created equal and that we all have the right to think and speak freely. Conservatives believe that these founding principles have made the United States a powerful force for good in the world. Although there is no neat and tidy list of American conservative beliefs, there are several ideas that conservatives tend to agree with. One handy way to remember those ideas is the acronym FLINT, which corresponds to the 5 concepts of free enterprise, limited government, individual liberty, national defense, and traditional values. These 5 concepts are critical for understanding American conservative thought. Free enterprise. Conservatives recognize that free enterprise, or capitalism as it's also known, is the best system the world has ever seen for creating jobs and good living conditions. It has lifted countless millions of people out of poverty and made their lives better. The liberty we enjoy is closely connected to free enterprise. At its best, free enterprise makes possible the liberty we have to choose our own paths, to work toward our goals and dreams. Free enterprise brings the opportunity to obtain property, whether it be a home, a car, or a new pair of shoes. No one is really free without being able to retain the fruits of his or her own labor. Conservatives recognize the benefits of competition, which is a vital part of free enterprise. Competition between businesses creates better products and services, as well as lower prices. It encourages entrepreneurship and fosters good, hard work. The competition of free enterprise is a major reason businesses are usually more efficient and productive than government. For all these reasons, the American founders set up this country to be a commercial republic, as Alexander Hamilton called it. They wanted it to be a place where business flourishes and where freedom and commerce support each other so people can thrive. Like any human institution, free enterprise brings problems. It can cause excessive materialism and emphasis on money. Wide gaps can open between rich and poor. Competition can bring out the best in people, but sometimes it brings out the worst. Corporations sometimes take advantage of people, both customers and employees alike. Free enterprise requires some checks on its darker impulses. Sensible laws can help keep business free and fair. Even more important is a culture that values integrity and expects business to be conducted honestly. Despite its drawbacks, the free enterprise system is without equal in giving people the opportunity to earn a good living. It is a cornerstone of our republic, our liberty, and our nation's success. Limited government. Conservatives support the principle of limited government. That means government powerful enough to protect people's rights and vigorous enough to help make the country a better place, but not so powerful that it keeps sticking its nose into people's business and stepping on their liberties. The founders realized that over time, governments have a natural tendency to assume greater power and exert more control over people. Power, whether vested in many or a few, is ever-grasping, Abigail Adams wrote, and like the grave, cries, "Give, give." In framing the Constitution, the founders did their best to set up checks and balances to curb government's power. Despite their efforts, today's federal government keeps growing, spending, borrowing, taxing, and regulating. It's now so huge and clumsy that it has a hard time governing even itself. Many of its programs don't work very well. Bills passed by Congress are often so long and complex that few, if any, senators or congressmen read them before they become law. Researchers at the Library of Congress say that tallying the number of federal laws today is nearly impossible. Meanwhile, federal bureaucracies churn out thousands of regulations per year. Government spending is out of control. Every year, Washington spends more money than it has. As this book went to press in 2015, the federal debt was a staggering $18 trillion and rising, nearly $60,000 for every man, woman, and child. Conservatives believe we should respect the limits the Constitution places on government. The federal government should focus on vital jobs such as defending the country from foreign enemies, protecting basic rights, enforcing laws, ensuring equal opportunities, and helping people who are truly in need. It shouldn't be smothering businesses with regulations and burying the country under a mountain of debt. It shouldn't be taxing so much that it hurts the economy. Conservatives recognize that state and local governments, being closer to the people they serve, often do a better job at governing than the federal government in Washington, D.C. The elected representatives in state and local governments have a better sense of what works in their regions. And being closer means it's easier for citizens to hold those representatives accountable. It's a mistake to assume that government has a solution for every problem. Government has important work to do, but in the task of helping society remain intact, much work takes place in the families, neighborhoods, churches, temples, schools, and voluntary groups that make communities good, healthy places to live. Individual liberty. The Declaration of Independence states that all people are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, including the right to liberty. Our right to liberty does not come from government. It is a gift from God. Government's job is to protect that right. If you look back at history, you realize that most people never got to enjoy much freedom. Most of the world's history is one of rule by kings, emperors, dictators, and governments that told people how they must live. It's still true today in many parts of the world. Liberty is a rare and precious thing, and conservatives are mindful that we must never take it for granted. Liberty doesn't mean being able to do whatever you want without regard for yourself or others. That is licentiousness, a lack of moral restraint. Millennia ago, the Greek philosopher Aristotle pointed out that liberty is no good unless it involves some limits. Every man should be responsible to others, nor should anyone be allowed to do just as he pleases, he wrote. For where absolute freedom is allowed, there is nothing to restrain the evil which is inherent in every man. Conservative thought stresses that true liberty comes with responsibilities. It involves seriousness about acting the right way. It means using your freedom to take charge of yourself and your conduct and owning up to it. Liberty worth having requires virtues like self-restraint, honor, and respect for others. It involves living up to obligations to family members, friends, neighbors, and anyone who may depend on you. It involves thinking not just of self, but of the common good as well. True liberty implies respecting the rights of others and abiding by the law. In a democracy, it also means abiding by the will of the majority while preserving the rights of the minority. When people neglect those duties, liberty disintegrates. In a self-governing nation like the United States, it's critical that citizens take responsibility for their own decisions and actions. It's also critical for citizens to assume some obligation for the well-being of their community and their country. When we don't take responsibility for ourselves and our communities, government often assumes it for us. Whenever that happens, we forfeit some of our liberty.